Imagine, you're the CEO of a major car manufacturer, right? And you are just totally tired of dealing with supply chain delays for rubber.
Oh, yeah, the classic headache.
Right. So you make this bold move. You just buy the massive factory that makes your tires, thinking, I've just brilliantly secured my supply chain.
Yep.
But then you wake up the next day and you realize you've just inherited this multi-million-dollar headache in like a chemical manufacturing industry that you know absolutely nothing about.
It is a brutal wake-up call. I mean, it happens to a lot of executives. You think you're solving a bottleneck, right?
Yeah.
But you're actually just, well, you're stepping into a minefield of capacity imbalances and, frankly, a whole new set of operational risks.
Exactly. And welcome to the deep dive, because today that invisible high-stakes machinery of global business strategy is our mission. We're unpacking how massive organizations figure out their place in the world and make these colossal decisions.
And we've got some great source material for this. We're pulling from Advanced Supply Chain Strategy, specifically the APCS CPIM curriculum.
Module 1, Section B to be exact, the real heavy hitter frameworks that top professionals use to, analyze environments and figure out their strategic scope.
Yeah, and to really understand this, I think it helps to think of a global supply chain, not as like a mechanical assembly line, but more as a highly sensitive, delicate ecosystem.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, because if you introduce a new species into an ecosystem, say a new product line or a new supplier, every single other element has to adapt or, it dies.
Right. You can't just look at your own factory floor. It reminds me of planning a massive cross-country road trip. Right?
Okay, yeah.
Like first you have to check the weather and the road conditions. That's the external environment. Then you check what kind of car you have, if your tires are good, which is the internal environment.
And then only after you've done all that do you actually map out your route and your destination, which is a strategic scope.
Exactly. So let's start by looking out the window, the external environment, because you can't plan a resilient supply chain in a vacuum. Strategists use this tool called a steeple analysis for this, right?
Right, STEEBLE. So it's an acronym. It forces a company to look at sociocultural, technological, economic, ethical, political, legal, and environmental factors. It's the macro view.
That's a lot to keep track of.
It is, yeah. But the goal isn't just to make a list. It's to track the velocity of these massive tectonic plates. A company isn't just watching its direct competitor across the street. It really needs to watch for a sudden shift in, say, global environmental regulations.
Let's put a real mechanism to that. Like, if I'm a massive fast food chain and the sociocultural trend suddenly shifts heavily towards sustainable zero-waste packaging,
Right.
that isn't just a marketing problem, is it? If I don't catch that shift early, my entire existing supply chain, which is, totally optimized to pump out billions of cheap plastic containers, it just becomes a massive liability overnight.
Precisely. And it goes way beyond just consumer trends to hard economics and politics. Like, if a new tariff is introduced politically, the economic cost of your raw materials, well, it could double in a week.
Wow.
Yeah. So a steeple analysis is really about building an early warning system. But alongside those massive global shifts, you also have to analyze the immediate daily knife fight of your specific industry.
The day-to-day pressure. And these frameworks highlight that the most critical dynamic for a supply chain to master isn't actually about, destroying your competitor. It's this constant tug-of-war between supplier power and buyer power.
Yes. This is where the mechanics of negotiation really break down into pure leverage. In any transaction, the power tilts based on dependency.
Okay, so how does that work?
Well, suppliers hold the power when demand for their specific material is high, but the supply is really constrained.
Right.
But, it goes much deeper than just basic scarcity.
See, I always assumed buyers only really have power if they're massively wealthy, like a Walmart or an Amazon, right? Where they can just dictate terms because of their sheer volume.
I mean, size is a tremendous advantage, absolutely.
Yeah.
But actually, a buyer's sharpest weapon is transparency.
Transparency. Wait, how so?
Specifically, knowing the supplier's exact costs. If you are a buyer and you know precisely what it costs your supplier in raw materials, labor, and overhead to produce a widget.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that supplier can no longer artificially inflate their profit margin during negotiations. You've completely neutralized their information advantage.
That is fascinating. So the buyer gains power through pure data, but how does a supplier build a moat against that? How do they fight back?
They create incredibly high switching costs.
Ah,
Yeah, like if you're a manufacturer and your supplier integrates their proprietary software directly into your inventory system, switching to a new supplier doesn't just mean signing a new contract.
oh man, it means tearing out your whole IT infrastructure.
Exactly. Retraining your staff, risking months of downtime. Your current supplier knows this, which means they hold the leverage. They have locked you in.
Okay, but let's unpack this. If we find out during our external scan that we are just a minor part of a massive supplier's revenue, doesn't that make our supply chain incredibly vulnerable? Like, how do we even maneuver around a supplier that has all the leverage?
Right.
If there's a global shortage, they'll just route all the inventory to their biggest clients and leave us starving.
They absolutely will. And that harsh reality dictates your strategy. If you lack purchasing power, the strategy shifts toward forming alliances.
Like teaming up with other small companies.
Yeah, consortium buying. You band together to create a larger negotiating block, or alternatively, you intentionally seek out and nurture a smaller, up-and-coming supplier.
Oh, you give them your business to help them grow.
Right, and in return, you become their priority client. You essentially have to engineer your way out of dependency.
That's brilliant. Now, there is another external threat the frameworks warn about. And it's not the competitor making a slightly better version of your product. It's the threat of substitute products.
Oh, this is a classic blind spot for so many companies.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Because a substitute isn't a direct rival. It is a completely different approach to solving the exact same customer problem.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, if you manufacture aluminum cans, your biggest long-term threat might not be another aluminum company. It might be, say, a chemical company developing a rigid, biodegradable pouch.
Okay, so how do you actually spot a substitute before it destroys your market share? Do you just, sit around reading science journals all day?
Well, no. You follow the money and the capacity.
The capacity.
Yeah, the warning signs flash red when makers of a substitute product start noticeably increasing their production capacity, or when their financial reports show they're enjoying, significantly better profit margins than your industry.
Right, because if they're attracting capital and expanding way faster than your core product, the external environment is turning incredibly hostile.
Exactly. But analyzing the external environment, it only tells you what the market wants and what the threats are. It doesn't actually tell you if you can deliver a solution.
Right, the car inspection part of our road trip analogy.
Yeah.
To figure that out, you have to turn the microscope inward. We have to analyze the internal environment.
And looking inward requires brutal honesty about what your organization is actually capable of executing. The strategic frameworks draw a very hard line here between two concepts that get confused all the time: resources and capabilities.
Yeah, I always find it helpful to think about this like a high-end restaurant.
Okay, let's hear it.
So if I go out and buy a state-of-the-art commercial kitchen, source the absolute rarest Wagyu beef, and hire a massive staff, those are just my resources. They are the tangible and intangible assets I own. But if my head chef lacks the specific culinary knowledge to actually cook that beef without ruining it, the restaurant will fail. The technique, the organizational knowledge, the execution, that is the capability.
That analogy holds perfectly in global supply chains.
Mm-hmm.
A resource is just dormant potential, like a fleet of autonomous delivery trucks. That's a resource.
Right.
But the algorithmic routing system, the maintenance protocols, and the management expertise required to actually make those trucks deliver packages faster and cheaper than the competition, that is the capability.
And capabilities take years to build, right?
Decades sometimes.
Yeah.
Which is why they're so much harder for competitors to copy.
So to actually map out where those capabilities live, companies basically tear their operations apart using something called value chain analysis.
Yes, the value chain. It's the mechanical sequence of every single activity a company performs to design, produce, market, deliver, and support its product.
And margin or profit is only created when the total value perceived by the customer exceeds the cumulative cost of performing all those sequential activities.
What? Exactly. You're trying to add more value at each step than it costs to perform that step.
The primary activities seem pretty straightforward to me. It's essentially the physical flow. You have purchasing to get the raw materials, operations to actually build the thing, logistics to move it to a warehouse, sales and marketing to convince someone to buy it, and customer service to keep them happy.
Those are the primary physical nodes, sure. But the real hidden architecture, and where a lot of companies fail, lies in the support activities.
Like what?
Human resources, information technology, procurement, accounting. The critical insight from the CPIM frameworks here is how deeply interconnected they all are. A failure in a support activity instantly destroys the value of a primary activity.
Give me an example of that interaction. Like, how does IT ruin a perfect product?
Okay, imagine your operations team is world-class. They are churning out perfect products at record speed. But your information technology infrastructure, a support activity, has a data routing error. Suddenly, logistics doesn't know which warehouse needs the product. The inventory just sits on a loading dock, racking up storage fees, while sales is dealing with angry customers whose orders are delayed.
So the physical product is totally flawless, but the IT failure dragged the entire chain's profitability into the negative.
Precisely. Every single link has to be audited for efficiency.
But the way you optimize those links, it depends entirely on where your product sits in its life cycle, right? Like a product in its introduction phase requires a completely different supply chain than a product in its decline phase.
Absolutely. The product life cycle dictates your entire operational objective. Let's look at the growth phase, specifically for something with a very short life cycle.
Okay, so think of fast fashion or a highly trendy consumer electronic device.
Right.
With something like that, I would assume the goal is to negotiate ruthlessly with suppliers to get the manufacturing cost as close to zero as possible. You know, to maximize the profit on a cheap item.
Actually, that approach will likely kill the product entirely.
Wait, really? Why?
Because if a trend only lasts 6 months, your dominant strategy cannot be slow, incremental cost savings. The primary objective must be to maximize revenue generation immediately before the window closes.
Oh, because if you spend 3 months negotiating a cheaper shipping rate, by the time the product arrives on a slow boat, nobody wants to wear it anymore.
Exactly the mechanism. For short life cycles, you intentionally absorb higher supply chain costs. You might pay a massive premium to fly the garments on cargo planes rather than putting them on ocean freighters.
Wow, okay.
You might even build excess manufacturing capacity up front, knowing some of it will sit idle later, just to ensure you never have a stockout during peak demand. You sacrifice cost efficiency for sheer speed and availability.
Okay, but if I'm selling a standard stainless steel refrigerator, a product deep in its maturity phase, people are going to be buying that exact model for the next 10 years.
And that completely flips the value chain strategy. Speed is no longer the premium. In the maturity phase, the market is saturated, and competition is almost entirely based on price and reliability.
So then you focus on cost.
Yes. Now, your operations shift heavily toward cost control.
Yeah.
You move production to lower-cost regions, you optimize ocean freight, and you lean out your inventory.
Okay, so we know the external threats, the steeple shifts, the supplier leverage. We know our internal muscles, our true capabilities, and where our product sits in its life cycle. The final piece of the puzzle is taking all that data and deciding, what is the actual move?
Right, how do we expand?
Yeah, how do we grow? Which brings us to strategic scope.
Strategic scope is where theory really hits the real world. And the foundational map for navigating this is the Ansoff Product Market Growth Matrix.
It's a grid, basically.
It's a grid that forces executives to classify their growth strategy by looking at 2 variables. Are we using existing products or new products? And are we targeting existing markets or new markets?
Let's walk through the mechanics of that grid, because if you take your existing products and just try to sell more of them to your existing market, that is market penetration, right?
Right. You launch a massive ad campaign to get current soda drinkers to drink 2 sodas a day instead of 1.
Simple enough. If you take new products to your existing market, that's product development. Like a popular smartphone company realizing their users also want wireless earbuds, so they build them.
Exactly. But the complexities really multiply when you move across the grid. If you take an existing product into a completely new market, say, taking a popular domestic brand and launching it in South America, that is market development.
Right.
But the absolute most dangerous quadrant of the Ansoff matrix is attempting to take completely new products into completely new markets. That is diversification.
And companies pursue diversification because they want resilience, right? It's the ultimate hedge. Like if my core business is selling premium coffee, maybe I decide to buy a software company. That's unrelated diversification.
Right, the theory being.
If coffee beans have a bad harvest, I still have software revenue keeping the company afloat.
That is the financial theory, yes.
Right.
But the operational reality is often a disaster. Oh, yeah. Unrelated diversification is pure corporate investment with zero synergy. You are essentially acting as a holding company. The strategic frameworks heavily warn against this because of the sheer danger of unfamiliarity.
Because you don't have the capabilities.
Exactly. Your internal value chain, which is optimized to roast and ship coffee, has zero capability to manage software developers or navigate tech life cycles. You end up with this bloated, disconnected conglomerate where neither side understands the other's operational needs.
Which is why related diversification makes way more sense mechanically. You expand into a new market, but you lean on an existing capability. Like an automotive company using their world-class battery technology to start selling home energy storage systems.
Right, new product, new market, but the core technological capability is the same. You achieve economies of scale through shared research, shared manufacturing, and shared brand trust. It is a much safer bet.
That makes total sense. But let's look at market development specifically, global expansion. Because going global is a massive headache. Why do companies take on the logistical nightmare of crossing borders?
Usually it's a mix of push and pull, a mature domestic market where you literally cannot squeeze another dollar out of consumers. That will push you to look outward.
You might also be pushed by heavy new regulations at home, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But the pull is usually about cost. Setting up operations globally often allows a company to tap into radically lower production costs or closer proximity to raw materials.
But going global forces a massive decision about your product architecture, doesn't it? You have to choose between a global strategy and a multi-domestic strategy.
Yes. Let's look at personal computers versus something like canned soup.
Okay, well, a laptop is essentially the exact same machine whether you buy it in Tokyo, London, or New York.
Which means personal computers perfectly fit a true global strategy. The components are standardized worldwide. The entire supply chain is designed to achieve massive economies of scale.
Right, you build one colossal, highly efficient mega factory in a low-cost region, mass-produce the exact same motherboard, and just ship it globally.
Exactly. The strategic mantra there is think global, act global.
But soup. Soup is deeply personal. Food relies completely on local cultural tastes. You cannot mass-produce one single flavor of soup in a mega factory and expect it to sell globally.
No, you definitely can't. So soup requires a multi-domestic or transnational strategy.
Okay.
You keep the parent brand name, sure, but your supply chain has to physically decentralize. You might need to build separate, smaller manufacturing facilities in Europe, Asia, and North America.
And source local ingredients to match the local palate.
Exactly.
Right.
You actively sacrifice the massive economies of scale of a single factory in order to achieve deep market penetration. The mantra shifts to think local, act local.
That makes a lot of sense. You adapt the supply chain nodes to the cultural reality of the product. But there is another type of expansion that doesn't involve crossing oceans. It involves gobbling up your own supply chain. Let's talk about integration.
Sure. Horizontal integration is fairly straightforward. It is when an organization acquires a competitor at the exact same level of the value chain.
Like a shoe retailer buying another shoe retailer to double their market share.
Yep. But vertical integration is what brings us back to the scenario from the very beginning of the deep dive. The car manufacturer buying the tire factory.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
It is the degree to which a firm decides to directly own multiple sequential stages of its value chain. Backward integration is reaching back to buy your suppliers. Forward integration is reaching forward to buy your retail distributors.
And as we discussed with the tire factory, backward integration is incredibly seductive on a spreadsheet. You think you are eliminating the middleman's profit margin and securing your raw materials against shortages.
But the operational friction is enormous.
Because of capacity imbalances, right? Let's walk through the math of why that tire factory becomes such a nightmare. If I'm a car manufacturer, aren't I just inheriting a massive headache in an industry I know nothing about? Does that actually make sense?
Well, let's say your car manufacturing plant needs 1 million tires a year to operate.
Okay.
But the tire factory you just purchased requires a production volume of 5 million tires a year just to cover its massive fixed costs and remain profitable.
Oh, wait. So what do I do with the other 4 million tires?
You have to sell them on the open market.
Wow.
Which means you, a car manufacturer, must now build a sales and marketing capability to sell tires to other companies, potentially even your direct competitors.
That is insane. I've completely diverted executive focus, capital, and resources away from my core competency building great cars just to prop up a supplier asset I didn't fully understand.
That sounds like a fast track to bankrupting the entire company, doesn't it? Which explains why outsourcing has become the dominant alternative to vertical integration. If you don't want the headache of owning the factory, you just pay someone else to do it.
Outsourcing allows a company to add value chain activities without the massive capital expenditure and ownership risks.
Right. If a specialized logistics firm can manage your warehousing and shipping 30% cheaper than you can internally, and with higher accuracy, it is a strategic imperative to let them do it.
But there has to be a limit, right? You can't outsource everything or you cease to be a company. You just become a brand name slapped on a collection of third-party contracts.
Yes. The hard boundary line in supply chain strategy is this.
Yeah.
You never, ever outsource your core competencies.
Okay.
If you are an aerospace company and your entire market dominance is built on a proprietary, ultra-efficient jet engine design, you can outsource the seating, you can outsource the landing gear, but you manufacture that engine internally.
Because if you outsource the core capability that creates your unique value, you're essentially training your supplier to become your replacement.
Exactly.
So, bringing this all together, what does this mean for you, the listener, as you navigate the modern economy? We've moved from scanning the macro shifts in global politics and environmental law down into the messy internal reality of IT systems and capabilities, right up to the board level where they decide to buy a tire factory or launch a localized soup in a new country.
It reveals that a successful strategy really cannot exist in silos. You cannot define your strategic scope on the Ansoff matrix if you haven't ruthlessly audited your internal capabilities.
Right.
And your internal capabilities mean nothing if you haven't anticipated the external steeple forces that could render your product obsolete tomorrow.
The hidden architecture is everywhere. When you see a massive corporate merger fail spectacularly, it's usually because they attempted unrelated diversification without internal synergy.
Yep.
When a product is suddenly out of stock for 6 months, it's because a company misjudged supplier power or failed to build a resilient alliance. This framework is literally the underlying code of global commerce.
And understanding it allows you to look past the marketing announcements and see the mechanical gears turning inside an organization. You start to see why decisions that seem totally baffling on the surface are actually calculated maneuvers to protect the value chain.
But here is a final lingering thought to leave you with. If a multi-billion-dollar corporation spends years perfectly analyzing its internal capabilities, maps its external environment flawlessly, and sets a brilliant strategic scope for the next decade,
Yeah.
how quickly does a true black swan event, like a sudden geopolitical conflict, an overnight technological disruption, or a paralyzed shipping canal, force them to completely tear up that matrix and start from scratch the very next morning?
That is the ultimate test. A
Absolutely.
strategy only survives until the ecosystem changes.
Something to keep in mind the next time you notice a slight delay on a package delivery. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.